Welcome to this episode. Picture this hypothetical exchange which is based on accurate, established historical facts. A young Nigerian named Osazuwa was sent by his parents to Tokyo in Japan to attend university there a few years back. When he arrived in Tokyo, he made friends with the local Japanese students at his university and of course told them his name, Osazuwa. When he did, they looked at him in shock and said to him, "Are you joking? That's a pure Japanese name." And he said to them, "Of course it's not Japanese, I'm from the Edo ethnic group in Nigeria." And the friends looked at him in even greater shock and said to him, "What did you just say your ethnic group was?" He repeated, "Edo." And then they said to him, "You've got to be kidding. Edo is the former name of Tokyo, this city we are in right now. Edo is the former name of Japan. It's also the name of the Edo Empire which reigned over Japan for centuries." Now, the Edo period of Japan was from 1603 to 1867 and was an era of military government. The dynasty was established by military commanders. Osazuwa, or Osa for short, was a history enthusiast, and he asked them who started the Edo Empire in Japan. And they said he was a military commander named Ieyasu. Osa was in total shock. The title of the military commander of the Edo Empire, i.e. the Benin Empire of Nigeria, who was second in power only to the king himself, was Iyase. As they chatted further, one of the Japanese looked up into the night sky and commented on the unusually bright moon, or Tsuki, and also asked him, "What did you just call the moon?" "Tsuki," he replied. And then Osa said, "In Edo, we call the moon Uki." And they looked at him in pure astonishment. And then he added, "Uki is also the name we use for beauty." The Japanese kids stood bolt upright as they screamed, "And Tsuki is the name we also use for beauty." As they wondered aloud in amazement, an elderly Japanese man walked up to them to ask for directions, and the Japanese students greeted him by saying respectfully, "Domo, domo." Osa heard them and nearly fell off his chair. He said, "That's exactly how we greet elders in Edoland. We say, Domo." Not sure what would have happened after that hypothetical exchange, but we can't help thinking that the young men would have probably brushed it off as an almighty coincidence of sorts and went about their normal lives. But our research team here at the African History Station are not that easily brushed aside or brushed away from such quote-unquote coincidences, and we have been sniffing around that whole connection pretty much like a police dog trained to sniff out strange substances, and what we found was, to say the least, jaw-dropping. First off, let's discuss the Edo people of Benin, just to gain some familiarity with these people who we are connecting to ancient Japan. They founded a large kingdom they called Edo, known to the outside world as the Benin Empire or the Benin Kingdom, as early as the 9th century. They were among the various black African ethnic groups who migrated from Egypt, Nubia, and the area now known as the Middle East into West and Central Africa from between roughly 300 BC right up to about 900 AD for various reasons, including increased desertification of the Sahara and foreign invasions by Greeks, Romans, and later on Arabs. Seemingly, literally the first thing the Edo people did when they got to southern Nigeria was to build an absolutely massive wall and military rampart surrounding the entire kingdom, and even separating internal towns and villages, one from the other. Was there a plan to keep out the Arabs and other invaders? If that was the plan, it surely worked, because they went on to thrive and prosper independently, free of foreign invasion for many centuries, right up till 1897 when the British invaded them. According to the UK Guardian newspaper, the Guinness Book of Records 1974 edition described the walls of Benin City and its surrounding kingdom as the world's largest earthworks carried out prior to the mechanical era. According to estimates by the new scientist Fred Pierce, Benin City's walls were at one point 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China and consumed 100 times more material than the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. Situated on a plain, Benin City was enclosed by massive walls in the south and deep ditches in the north. Beyond the city walls, numerous further walls were erected that separated the surroundings of the capital into around 500 distinct villages. Pierce writes that these walls extended for some 16,000 kilometers in all, in a mosaic of more than 500 interconnected settlement boundaries. They covered 6,500 square kilometers and were all dug by the Edo people. They took an estimated 150 million hours to construct and are perhaps the largest single archaeological phenomenon on the planet. Benin City was also one of the first cities to have a semblance of street lighting. Huge metal lamps, many feet high, were built and placed around the city, especially near the king's palace. Fueled by palm oil, their burning wicks were lit at night to provide illumination for traffic to and from the palace. When the Portuguese first discovered the city in 1485, they were stunned to find this vast kingdom made of hundreds of interlocked cities and villages in the middle of the quote-unquote African jungle. They called it the Great City of Benin. Indeed, they classified Benin City as one of the most beautiful and best planned cities in the world. In 1691, the Portuguese ship captain Lourenço Pinto observed that Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and as far as the eye can see. The houses are large, especially that of the king, which is richly decorated and has fine columns. The city is wealthy and industrious. It is so well governed that theft is unknown, and the people live in such security that they have no doors to their houses. Houses are built alongside the streets in good order, the one close to the other, writes the 17th century Dutch visitor Alfred Dapper. Adorned with gables and steps, they are usually broad with long galleries inside, especially so in the case of the houses of the nobility, and divided into many rooms which are separated by walls made of red clay, very well erected. Wealthy residents kept these walls as shiny and smooth by washing and rubbing as any wall in Holland can be made with chalk, and they're like mirrors. The upper stories are made of the same sort of clay. And regarding the world-famous Benin bronzes, the Guardian writes that, at the height of its greatness in the 12th century, well before the start of the European Renaissance, the kings and nobles of Benin City patronized craftsmen and lavished them with gifts and wealth in return for their depiction of the kings and dignitaries' great exploits in intricate bronze sculptures. These works from Benin are equal to the very finest examples of European casting technique, wrote Professor Felix von Luschen, formerly of the Berlin Ethnological Museum in Germany. Benvenuto Cellini could not have cast them better, nor could anyone else before or after him. Technically, these bronzes represent the very highest possible achievement. So when we're talking about the Edo people of Benin and Nigeria, we're referring to a really sophisticated ethnicity with a grand history and all manner of capacity for that era. At this point, we must mention that what we found in our research actually connects Japan to many African languages from Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Zambia, and even Mauritania, signifying that there was a very ancient contact, perhaps in deepest antiquity, when there was a more homogeneous African lingua franca, perhaps spoken by the Jomon and the Ainu people, Japan's earliest inhabitants who came from Africa and later intermarried with Mongoloids and had replaced the original African population of small black Negritos that had populated the entire earth, including Japan, before any other group of people. In addition, the early Japanese historians themselves have described for us the black barbarians of the south who, in an age which antedates authentic history, came from the south in ships and settled in Japan. These immigrants mingled and amalgamated one with another and with the natives, and in time became a homogeneous race whose predominating physical characteristics bespeak the unmistakable presence of a large Negro element. The Ainus dominated Japan until a group of warriors known as the Yayoi arrived around 300 BC and conquered them. Till today, the origins of the Yayoi people is still disputed. No Japanese account identifies Yayoi as coming from any part of Asia. And Yayoi is actually an Ainu term for invaders. Were these invaders African? We think so. Mainstream research usually refers to the Yayoi as having arrived Asia on ships from quote-unquote elsewhere. They never say where elsewhere was. But there also seems to be a much more recent injection of a profound African influence, and all evidence points to the West African nation of Nigeria as being the source of that influence, and we're talking perhaps just a little over 600 to 1,000 years ago. The Edo period of Japan lasted from 1603 to 1867. It began when Tokugawa Ieyasu became an elite military commander or shogun in 1603 after a victory at Sekigahara in 1600 and brought 200 years of stability and peace and prosperity to Japan. The name Ieyasu is a stunning link to the same name given to top Benin military commanders. The Iyase of Benin is regarded as second in command of the Benin military after the Oba. Here we can see an actual ancient sculpture of an Iyase military commander. According to the Met Museum, New York, who published the image, during the 15th century reign of Oba Eware, Benin's armies were formed and the fortification of its capital with a massive wall undertaken. In parallel, delegations of Portuguese traders assiduously sought to secure exclusive commercial treaties with this leader of the region's most powerful polity, For nearly 500 years, Benin's independent leaders firmly established the terms of engagement with Portuguese, Dutch and French agents and effectively represented their own interests. So the Benin Empire, which exchanged ambassadors with Portugal, by the way, in the 1500s, was a thriving, formidable, wealthy power in West Africa with a standing army of 200,000, half of them cavalry, and it absolutely was not beyond them to ship bands of troops to Asia. Regarding the Edo period of Japan, which is the focus of our discussion, here's what Japanese author Fujita Midori wrote in his epic work titled The Presence of Black People in Japan During the Edo Period. For Africa, the catalogue depicted couples labelled as belonging to the regions of Kafuri, Guinea, Loren and Ahirika. As both Java and Monomotapa are located in the tropics, the Korobo have black skin and very curly hair, and their eyes and noses are completely different from those of the Japanese people. The presence of a black person in Watu-Chinke, along with the Japanese, Chinese, Dutch and Koreans, though the latter two only appear in conversations between the former two Asian groups, presents the concept of internationalism that cover the three traditional continents and races. And as early as 1889, an association to preserve Edo culture had been established in Tokyo. It claims that the Tokugawa period, i.e. the Edo period, was the period in which Japanese civilization achieved its greatest progress and development. Also, researchers have noted that recent DNA studies corroborate these connections. A new genetic study suggests that the Japanese are more mixed with Africans than other East Asians. There is a connection between the Y DNA chromosomes. In DNA, haplogroups are families or lineages that descend from a common ancestor. Over centuries or millennia, they could number millions and billions and even have a different skin color from their forebears. But the DNA haplogroup is what identifies them, says what lineage you're from, where your great-great-granddaddy came from. Japanese and Africans share similar Y DNA called the Y DNA haplogroup DE. The Japan-specific Y DNA haplogroup is D and is a descendant of the African Y DNA haplogroup DE, which has been found in West Africa, specifically and in large measure in Nigeria, according to research by Di Giacomo and other scientists. The study by Di Giacomo et al. Found the following African haplogroups in Greeks. Haplogroup A, which is highly specific to West Africa, R1A, DE and J2. DE is found principally among Nigerians, and it is suspected that it originated from Nigeria. The other descendant of Y DNA haplogroup DE is Y DNA haplogroup E, which is the most frequent Y DNA haplogroup in Africa. As confirmed by researchers, there seems to be a hint of an excess of sharing between Japanese and Luya, that's African. I have to wonder whether this might have something to do with Y haplogroup D links the Japanese with African Y haplogroup E bearers. So, did the Edo period of Japan have some ancient Benin Edo influence from Africa? This should not be a shocking question at all, given the DNA evidence. There are indeed strange similarities between the Benin Edo culture of Nigeria and the Japanese Edo, and it appears that some ancient Japanese probably originated from the ancient Edo people of Nigeria. From prehistory, the Benin people have been known as the Edo people. The original name of Japan was Edo. The Edo founders of the Benin Empire used to be ruled by the Ogiso, kings of the sky. The Japanese call the emperors sky kings. The Edos of Benin were and are a pure warrior clan. The Japanese are a pure warrior clan. The Edo people of Nigeria were artists, sculptors and carvers of such infinite precision that their ancient artworks still shock the human mind. Japanese art and artistry are universally recognized for immaculate precision. The word Osa means God in Benin. The Japanese call head or leader or chief Osa. The name for king in Japan is O. The name for king in Benin is Oba. The word Obito is the title of original chief in Japan, as in Obito no Oji. This is related to the Benin Edo word for the chief or ruler, which is Oba. Ie is house in Japanese, and Ile is house in next door to Benin, Yoruba. The Japanese also have some cultural practices that are rather similar or reminiscent of Edo practices. Shintoism, so-called ancestor worship, very similar to what operates with the Edo people. Shintoism, Japan's main religion, is all about shrines, ancestors, mountain spirits, tree spirits, the so-called heathen religions that were used to justify the colonization of Africans. Japanese festivals and dressing are also remarkably African in color combination and style. So why do modern Japanese look different from Edos and Africans? The likelihood is that most of the band of Edo settlers from Benin would have been men who simply married into the female population of their new Asian settlement and thereby eventually blended in with the dominant light skin tones of Japan. Hence we see quite a lot of Edo period figures who appear to be of mixed race. Is it impossible that a band of Edo warriors from Benin conquered Japan, took women of the conquered people for wives, concubines, and over time their offspring looked exactly like the dominant indigenous population? We reckon that's precisely what happened. Why was Japan the only Asian nation that had a clan of fighter citizens, samurai warriors, whose only occupation was war, conquest, and who became lords and ruled over the Japanese and subjugated them to farming and civil duties? Is it possible that the Edo warriors created the privileged class of fighters that the world came to know as the samurai? These Benin sculptures show the top commanders always holding a long sword and a short sword, a ceremonial outfit. And here we see the same thing in the samurai and warrior classes of Japan. Indeed, if you walked into a store in Japan to buy a samurai outfit, here's what you're given. Straight black warrior from Africa. So how did the Edo people make the voyage? Had to be by sea. The same way various peoples moved from Africa to Asia for thousands of years. The Benin Empire was both a land and river empire. Another idea is that they passed through Central Africa to the East African coast and sailed from there, which would have been a much shorter and easier journey. And according to Alice Lindsley, author of The Edomite and The Colour Red, the Nigerian Edo people who formed the famous Benin Kingdom and the Edomites of the Bible are related genetically. She wrote that these are among Abraham's ancestors who came out of Africa. These were originally river peoples who moved along river systems and mountain ridges, the high places. They dispersed rather widely and settled in different regions, including the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley and southern Europe. Some lived in the Red City of Petra, the capital of the Nabatean territory in Edom, modern Jordan. The Greeks called the Edomites the Idumea, or red people, which we must add here reflects the red costume always worn in Benin ceremonial outfits. Abraham's father was called Terah. Terah was a royal name associated with the Ainu of the Upper Nile. These spread as far as Japan, where only about 300 pure-blooded Ainu still remain on the island of Hokkaido. The original name of Tokyo was Edo. Among the Ainu, Terah means priest. Abraham's father was Terah, a ruler, priest, whose territory along the Tigris River extended between Ur and Haran. The Edomites of the Bible are related to the Edo or Idu of Nigeria and Benin. The title of their rulers is further evidence. The ruler of the Edo is called Oba, and the first ruler of Petra was the deified Nabatean king Obodas. The Edomites, along with the Jebusites, appear to have belonged to the Horite Confederation, which originated in the Upper Nile region. This is the homeland of Abraham's ancestors and is called Cush in Genesis 10. From ancient Kush, the people spread in many directions. Some live today in Nigeria and Benin as the Edo or Idu. And we ask, did some head from Kush to the East African coast and sail to Asia and Japan? Likewise, the biblical Jebusites have living descendants in Nigeria. They're called the Ijebu, and they're just next door to Benin in Nigeria today. The Jebusites built and controlled Jerusalem. Melchizedek was the priest king of Jerusalem in Abraham's time. Very likely he and Abraham were kin. In the ethnology of the Japanese race, Reverend Bodie attempted to document what he considered a prominent and indelible African strain running through early Japanese history, and that the Japanese people are, at least in part, Asian Negroes. The Japanese were likely made lighter of skin by invaded Mongolians, which is why southern Japanese people are darker skinned today than their northern counterpart, similar to China and India. In addition, scholars have found utterly astonishing linguistic connections between several Asian and African languages, with several African native languages being spoken right now by populations in Asia. For instance, Mian or Yao is a group of related languages spoken by the Yao people, a Bantu group in Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania. They are also called Wayao. They speak the same language in terms of nouns and verbs with the Mian tribal group of China today. If the Yao can trace the origin of their language from China with sufficient facts, what will then stop the Magavu Man of Nigeria and other tribes or related groups from the Niger-Congo family from doing the same, since they shared a lot of wordings and pronunciations in common and in practice? Bali is spoken in Indonesia and at the same time in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so also is Sotho, which is spoken in Lesotho, South Africa and Botswana. According to Higgins, author of the world-famous sensational work Anacalypsis, a very great nation of blacks did rule over almost all Asia in a very remote era, in fact beyond the reach of history or any of our records. And relating to his wider research, he declared, "We have found the black complexion or something relating to it whenever we have approached the origin of nations." And H. Imbert, a French anthropologist, said in his book Les Negritos de la Chine, "The Negroid races peopled at some time all the south of India, Indochina and China. The south of Indochina actually has now pure Negritos as the Semangs and mixed as the Malays and the Sakes." Chinese dynastic records from as early as 192 CE reference a kingdom of Lin Yi, which meant the land of black men. They stated the inhabitants possessed black skin, eyes deep in the orbit, nose turned up, hair frizzy, at a period when they were not yet subject to foreign domination, and preserved the purity of this type. The fate of the black kingdoms and the black people of Far East Asia must be tied to increased pressure from non-Africoid peoples pushing down from Northern Asia, according to scholars. Ships of the Lin Yi, known to the Chinese by the appellation Kunlun Bo, meaning vessels of black men, were navigating the current of the Indian Ocean from Southeast Asia to Madagascar. According to British author Godfrey Higgins in his world-famous work Anacalypsis, Funan is the name given by Chinese historians to the earliest kingdom of Southeast Asia. Its builders were black people known as Khmers, a name that loudly recalls ancient Kemet, Egypt. In remote antiquity, the Khmers seem to have established themselves throughout a vast area that encompassed Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Thailand and Vietnam. To conclude, we have the names. The Japanese names, which when read out to people in Nigeria, are frequently met by absolute astonishment at the incredible similarity. Most of these Japanese names are also pure Nigerian names. Many are not Edo Benin names but are from their neighbouring Igbo, Yoruba and Hausa regions as well, all in the same country of Nigeria, because Benin was an empire which encompassed parts of those regions in the past. So it's not at all inconceivable that members of other ethnicities would have been part of Benin's expeditions. Any person from the country of Nigeria should please tell us what he or she thinks of this list in the comments below. What we can tell you is that if you went to a market square in the middle of Nigeria today and read out these names to a crowd and at the end told them that you were calling out Japanese names, they will laugh and call you a clown and say you were crazy. Probably even chase you out of the market and say you were there to mess with people's heads. Indeed, anyone familiar with Nigerians will recognize many of these names straight away. So here goes. Now, when this comparison has been done in the past, the list of names has tended to be quite small, making it easier for some people to put it down to coincidence. So we went to town on it and deliberately did research to pin down those Japanese names in their 100 and see what they tell us. Because here at the African History Station, the word coincidence does not really sit very well with our researchers, because we believe that where there's a connection, there's a history. So here goes, really briefly. So this is all a lot of supportive evidence of African movement and dominance of the region in antiquity. And as we look on the right of the screen at these incredible, astonishing sculptural images from the Edo period of Japan that just scream Africans, and consider the DNA evidence linking them to Nigeria, we ask the question, were the Edo people of the Benin Empire of ancient Nigeria in Africa involved in the Edo period of Japan? Here at the African History Station, we say, yes, they were. Thanks for watching this episode. Do remember to like, comment and subscribe, and look out for the next one on Africa's Great Civilizations.